Vietnam will on Wednesday mark the 50th anniversary of a brutal war that ended when the South Vietnamese capital of Saigon fell to communist forces. But millions of people still face daily battles with its chemical legacy. Today, around 3 million people, including many children, still suffer serious health issues associated with exposure to the chemicals used in the war.
The impacts on people in Vietnam have been primarily now in the second, third, possibly fourth generation, the consequence of birth defects and following and severe disabilities, both physical and mental disabilities.
Across Vietnam, U.S. forces sprayed about 72 million liters of defoliant during the war to strip the enemy's cover. More than half was a product known as Agent Orange, a blend of herbicides. The substance contained dioxin, a type of chemical linked to cancer, birth defects, and lasting environmental damage.
Thảm họa đem lại cái đau khổ cho cái 4 triệu dân Việt Nam này. Thì với trách nhiệm gây ra thì chúng tôi luôn luôn mong rằng để chính phủ Hoa Kỳ cũng như là các nhà sản xuất chất độc này phải có trách nhiệm để hỗ trợ lại đối với những nạn nhân.
Vietnam has spent decades cleaning up the toxic legacy of the war. After ignoring the growing evidence of its impact, the US in the mid-2000s began partially funding the cleanup in Vietnam, something that's now threatened by the cuts in US aid by the Trump administration. Hundreds of people gathered in a rally against Islamophobia in Paris on Sunday. Demonstrators came together to pay tribute to the man who was fatally stabbed while praying in a mosque in southern France on Friday.
Là pour apporter notre soutien, pour dire que ce genre d'actes n'ont pas leur place ici et faire en sorte que ça n'arrive plus.
Nous avons un système, nous avons un État qui a peur et c'est cette peur-là qu'on prend en plein fouet, mais en face, nous sommes là, le peuple il est là, le peuple français il est là et personne n'a peur.
French leaders condemned the attack. Prime Minister François Beirut denounced it as Islamophobic, and President Emmanuel Macron emphasized France will not tolerate racism and hatred based on religion. On Monday, French authorities said the suspect involved in the attack has been identified. According to a French prosecutor, the man turned up in a police station in Italy.
At least 40 people were killed and thousands injured after a large explosion rocked an Iranian port near the city of Bandar Abbas on Saturday. Local state media reported the fire was under control on Sunday and said activities had resumed at the port. However, images released by state television showed the extent of the damage caused by the blast. Helicopter footage showed a crater that appeared to be several meters deep, surrounded by charred containers and vehicles. Authorities have offered no cause for the explosion yet, and the Interior Ministry said it had launched an investigation into the blast. However, private security firm Ambry linked the explosion to a recent shipment the port received. They say that in March the port took a shipment of solid fuel intended for the use of Iranian ballistic missiles. The firm claims the fire may have started as a result of improper handling of the shipment. The explosion at the port damaged nearby offices and buildings. It also reportedly caused tremors that were felt in nearby cities. 11 people have been killed and at least 20 others injured after a car rammed into a crowd at a Filipino street festival in Vancouver, Canada, according to police. People were celebrating the Lapu-Lapu Day festival when a car entered the street on Saturday evening. A 30-year-old Vancouver man was arrested at the scene. Videos posted on social media showed victims and debris strewn across a long stretch of road, with at least 7 people lying immobile on the ground. The Vancouver Police Department added that they don't believe it was an act of terrorism and are carrying out an investigation. Israel has bombed Beirut's southern suburbs on Sunday. About an hour before the strike, Israel issued a warning stating it was targeting Hezbollah facilities and urged local residents to stay away from the site. The attack marks the third Israeli strike on the Lebanese capital since a ceasefire agreement with Hezbollah took effect in November last year. The first strike was on the 28th of March, when Israel also gave a warning. A second strike followed on April 1st. This was a surprise strike that had killed 4 people, including a Hezbollah official. Israel says it is targeting Hezbollah members and infrastructure, but Lebanon has urged the international community to pressure Israel to stop its near-daily attacks on southern and eastern parts of its country. It also requested that Israel withdraws its forces from the Lebanese territory it's still occupying as part of the ceasefire agreement.
Hospitals in Gaza received the remains of 51 people who were killed in Israeli strikes over the span of 24 hours, the health ministry said on Sunday. The Israeli military has carried out daily waves of airstrikes since 18 March, when it ended a 6-week ceasefire with Hamas, and ground forces have occupied more land to expand a buffer zone, controlling around 50% of the territory. It has also blocked the entry of all humanitarian aid to Gaza for nearly 60 days. It says both steps aim to pressure Hamas into releasing the remaining 59 hostages it holds. But rights groups call the blockade a starvation tactic and a potential war crime. Aid groups are running out of food and Palestinians struggle to feed their families. Meanwhile, Israeli anti-government protesters continued with their weekly rallies on Saturday, demanding a ceasefire and hostage deal. Hamas said it has sent a high-level delegation to Cairo to continue the indirect ceasefire negotiations with Israel.
Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen said that Greenland cannot be bought. His comments came after a meeting with Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen at her official residence on Sunday. Speaking to the media after their meeting, Nielsen called dialogue from the United States not respectful.
The talks from the United States have not been respectful. The words used have not been respectful. And that's why we need to, in this situation, stand together. And in Greenland, we're willing to do that with all the countries that wants us good and wants to respect us.
Nielsen made the remarks in defiance of US President Donald Trump's interest in taking control of the strategic territory. Russia launched a massive attack of nearly 150 drones over Ukraine from Saturday into Sunday, according to Ukraine's armed forces. Russian shelling on the often hit eastern town of Pavlorad killed an elderly man and injured a 14-year-old girl, said its regional governor. A little further west, in Dnipro, the town's mayor reported that at least 150 windows in high-rise buildings were smashed in the night attacks, leaving huge amounts of debris. 6 regions were affected by the strikes, including Zhytomyr, Dnipropetrovsk and Odessa. Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry released footage on Sunday claiming to show artillery hitting Ukrainian positions situated on the right bank of the Dnipro River. On Saturday, Russia claimed to have regained full control over its Kursk region. Ukrainian officials have denied the claim. As US President Trump said, he doubts Russia's President Putin wants to end the war.
Faced with American disengagement and the war in Ukraine, the EU needs to invest more in defense. In order to do this, the European Commission proposes redirecting part of the funds from the cohesion programme, originally created to reduce regional disparities between the 27 member states. But the Greens don't agree.
The money we are having in the cohesion programs are dealing with economic challenges, social division, and we can see that there are some more challenges to deal with. So that's why we think that we need to invest in security, yes, but we need to do that with fresh money and not by recycling some of the cohesion money as the Commission is proposing.
Cohesion funds account for €392 billion, or a third of the European budget between 2021 and 2027. At present, they can't be used to finance armies or purchase military equipment. However, they can be used to finance products with dual civil-military use, such as drones or machinery.
Wzmacnianie mostów, dróg dojazdowych przy granicach z Rosją, Ukrainą i Białorusią, budowanie schronów pod budynkami użyteczności publicznej, czy też przygotowywanie szpitali na ewentualny konflikt zbrojny. To są inwestycje, które na co dzień służą mieszkańcom, a w czasie wojny mogą służyć również obronności.
The European Commission would like to make these conditions more flexible to give capitals greater leeway in the use of these funds.
Many of the places that are poorest in the EU are also places under the greatest Russian threat. So it doesn't necessarily hurt the fight against European inequalities that way. It still brings things together. If you're investing in, in modernizing industry in Bulgaria and Romania, you're still investing in the cohesion of the EU.
But obstacles remain. For example, 37% of cohesion funds must be allocated to climate-related projects. In addition to defence, the European Commission proposes that these funds could also be allocated to decarbonisation, housing, water and energy.